It's Geeknights! I'm Greg.
And I'm Jennifer.
And tonight we'll be talking about Ub Iwerks.
Let's do this.
So, yeah, we don't know when RIM is going to release this.
Yeah, we answered his call for people to do podcasts to fill in, so here we are. A little bit more about us during the meta moment.
But we're here, and we're recording at some point. Actually, it's Independence Day, the real one.
The real American Independence Day. In other words?
Yeah. September 3rd.
September 3rd.
Yeah. That's when the Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War and recognized America as a sovereign nation, was signed.
So, citizens of the United States of America, if you are celebrating your independence on July 4th, you are doing it wrong.
Yep, that was just a bunch of old white dudes signing a piece of paper.
Well, in all fairness, the Treaty of Paris was also a bunch of old white dudes signing a piece of paper. It was just more important, much more enforceable piece of paper.
It was a piece of paper forged by the deaths of thousands.
Exactly, as opposed to, hey, this is our opinion about what our Declaration of Independence is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also happens to be Labor Day.
Today, yes, because it doesn't always match up exactly, because in the United States, Labor Day is the first Monday of September, as opposed to much of the rest of the world, which celebrates International Workers' Day on May 1st.
Mm-hmm. Is there historical significance behind that?
Oh, I'll bet there is, and I do not know the association.
Generally, you can assume that if it is on a specific day, it has a historical significance.
Usually, although I'm suspicious of the fact that it's May 1st. That it's like the first of the month. That's, well, whatever.
Well, it could be something that was scheduled.
True.
Because, okay, maybe it was a protest.
True.
Maybe it was some big protest in the streets that brought about radical change in policy.
Well, what do you say I Google that while we start into GeekBites? So,
all right, cool.
You want to do your GeekBite first?
We've decided not to do news because by the time you hear this, the news will be old and stale. To the point where you're like, really, that was news at some point? Or to the point where you actually didn't know that it happened because it was so old. But instead, we're doing GeekBites. And my GeekBite is kind of weird. I watched All This and World War II.
Ah.
Which is a movie that only barely exists. It was made in 1976 and is the story of World War II as told by news footage, movies, and the Beatles.
Cover songs.
Yes, covers.
Covers of Beatles songs.
The best Beatles covers you've ever heard.
Ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, it's interesting, the story behind that, because Fox was spending no money on this because they already had the rights. Well, not absolutely no money, but pretty much no money, because they already had the rights to all the footage, and they didn't need to shoot anything. So they just had to pay for editing. So they decided to license people to cover the Beatles so that they could sell the soundtrack, which ended up being the only thing that made money because it was the 70s and people did not want to go see a war movie.
Well, and the movie was marketed all wrong.
Oh my god.
The movie was just marketed all wrong.
I think that's just the 70s.
I think that's some of it, but I think
movies in the 70s just kind of were advertised like that.
Also, this was an art film. This was not potential blockbuster, and it was marketed like a blockbuster, but...
And it was released with... it was given a major release.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was in the theaters for 2 weeks. And then it left theaters never to be heard from again, except for rare showings at film festivals and TV. It's never going to get a DVD release because they would have. At the time, there wasn't a home video market, so they didn't get the home video rights to any of the covers.
Yeah, and the home video rights are extraordinarily complex.
Yeah.
Just because of the number of sources of intellectual property involved.
They would have to go into licensing with Rod Stewart, Tina Turner, the Moon Estate, the Gibb Estate. Oh my God! It's pretty much, and the amount of money they would demand versus the amount of money that the movie would actually make.
Yeah. However, you can find this on the internet either for download if you so choose, or
you can buy a bootleg.
You can buy a bootleg, which might be convenient for you depending on the state of your home network.
If you don't have a HDMI port on your TV like ours, and don't have like a PS3 or Xbox, then you're gonna want to get the bootleg if you want to watch it on the
or
big
if
screen.
you just want to support a relatively small business that does vintage films. I can't remember the name of the company that distributes the bootleg, but
I can't really get behind
not hard to find.
Supporting a business that sells bootlegs.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so I've got the history now at International Workers' Day, and this is shameful that we did not know this. This is absolutely shameful. At least as long as Wikipedia is telling me the truth.
It's the Roses Strike, isn't it?
Nope. International Workers' Day, according to Wikipedia, is the commemoration of the 1886 Haymarket Affair in Chicago. The police were trying to disperse a public assembly during a general strike for the 8-hour workday when an unidentified person threw a bomb at them. And then it goes on from there. So it's kind of...
a bomb at the police or the workers?
I believe at the police, because the police reacted by firing on the workers, killing dozens of demonstrators and several of their own officers.
I wonder what the NWA has to say about this.
NWA?
NWA.
And with attitude?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Oh, in terms of Frack the Police,
yes.
Which I should get because I'm old.
Yes.
But at any rate, it's kind of interesting that we celebrate this so little in the United States, given that we are in the country where the event happened.
To everyone listening, if you want to feel old, Straight Outta Compton came out in 1989. That was 23 years ago. I wasn't alive.
Yeah, more about our relative ages at the meta moment. So,
anyway,
for my GeekBite, I must put in a plug for Humanity Has Declined, which is an anime which is currently airing in Japan, and it's simulcasting on Crunchyroll, and I'm sure there's other places you can find it as well. I am enjoying it. It is an odd show. It's hard to even know what to say about it. When I first heard about it, it was everybody talking about the fact that a piece of bread essentially commits suicide in order to provide food for some people. And we're talking blood everywhere as the bread is killing itself. It's an odd little show in a lot of ways, but the basic concept of it is that the last generation of human beings has been born. It's like the room of Goff is empty from Ava or something. So no more human beings are being born, and the new dominant species on the planet is this species of fairies, and they're like maybe 5 or 7 inches tall, and it's not entirely clear to me, even 10 episodes in, exactly where they're going with this thing, but that's kind of what I like about it so much. There's a lot of stuff about the fairy and human interactions. There's a lot of things about food. Food is clearly playing a very important part in this show, and it's just kind of got an interesting style. It's very bitter and it's very cute, and that is appealing to me, but I can also see where for some people that would make it unappealing. But yeah, so I would say check it out on Crunchyroll or wherever else you may find your anime.
The things of the day. So, since I did my GeekBite first, I'm going to let you go first for the things of the day.
Okay. Well, the thing of my day has been the thing of many of my days now, actually, but I do not believe it has ever been mentioned on Geeknights, so I'm going to put in a plug for a webcomic called In His Likeness. It's grown in complexity over the years, but the basic concept is simple. All of the characters are represented by dots. And it's about God, and it's about the devil, and it's about Neptune. Eventually, it's about the devilettes. Sooner or later, Cthulhu gets involved. But it's a very simple visual style, and it's a kind of chatty, silly, punny in some corners kind of webcomic strip.
The first, 200 or 300 strips are really great. I haven't read anything in the last 100 that was about God, so I don't really like it as much. Because he's using, Cthulhu and cats, and it feels kind of Woo Game-ish.
There's some God stuff that's still going on more recently. But at any rate, In His Likeness, check it out.
And my thing of the day is an old classic that I was sure had been on Geeknights and discovered was not. So I'm going to cop out and use it anyway. But it is the Old Negro Space Program.
Ah.
A not Ken Burns documentary.
Indeed.
All I am going to say is that space is cold. I almost froze my mother a freaking nuts off. Alright, so, meta moment?
Alrighty then, yes, meta moment. So some of you know us from the Front Row Crew forums. I am JTVH on the forums, and Greg is Greg. You might know us from some of the panels that we do at anime conventions and similar conventions like Kineticon. You might know us as 2/3 of the family that geeks together.
By the time this goes up, for all we know, we'll have been Otakon panelists.
Who knows? We'll hope.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if Otakon wants any of our stuff next year. But at any rate, we also have another project that you may not be aware of, which is I am one of the co-hosts and co-producers of a podcast called Those Darn Cats. My co-host is my best friend Lisa, and we talk about all things Disney, and we touch on things from the reviews of different Disney Cruise Line ships to a feminist analysis of Minnie's country home in Toontown in Magic Kingdom, to an unfortunate lack of theming event at the Tomorrowland Noodle Terrace, which is inexplicably our most downloaded show. We did a show one time on gay days at Disney parks, which is a more inflammatory topic than one might imagine. We had different people come on as guests for that. So at any rate, if you're interested in Disney stuff at all, check it out at thosedarncats.net.
All right. So, into the main bit?
Absolutely.
All right. So, Ub Iwerks is the man that Disney doesn't want you to know about.
Yeah.
He's the man that they want you to think Walt was. He designed Mickey Mouse. He was an amazing, single-handedly, he was an amazing engineer. He went off and did his own stuff, trained Chuck Jones, who is known as the director of all your favorite Warner Brothers cartoons. Where should we start?
Where should we start? Well, first of all, let me just say he's the man that Disney kind of doesn't want you to know, because he is listed as a Disney legend in their Legends series.
Not for any of the reasons that they don't want you to know about. The weird part is they published the book The Hand Behind the Mouse, which is kind of what exposes all this. They made it into a documentary. You can buy this documentary on the Disney Treasury's DVD, which it's the Oswald collection.
Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, yep.
So they let you know about him, but it's a pain in the ass to find any of these. I could not find any Disney Treasuries when looking for them on the Disney site.
Oh, now that's interesting, because they're not hard to find at Best Buy. Or at least they weren't when that first came out, yeah.
Yeah, but, just the interface did not let me find them. I gave up and went to Google and Googled for the product I was looking for. So they're willing to admit that he did this, but they're not willing to publicize him as the god he was, which is a shame because he was a lot more amazing than they even let. He was a more amazing person than Walt the Legend was. For example, Disney in 1936 spent $7 million on a multiplane camera. The multiplane camera is something that allows multiple cells to be used in one frame of animation, which sounds like a waste of celluloid, or celluloid.
Celluloid. A waste of celluloid is a whole different topic.
It seems like a waste of celluloid, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to move things at different rates, so that Don Quixote is moving faster than the forest is moving faster than the castle.
Mm.
That's just one example. 3 years before Disney developed it, Ub Iwerks at his own independent studio at MGM, which had been founded in 1930, the studio, not MGM, Ub bought a used car for under $1,000 and made one out of that.
Well, and that, interestingly enough, that is the multiplane camera that they talk about in the attraction One Man's Dream about Walt Disney.
If you ever go to Disney World, go to One Man's Dream. Well, first read the book, The Hand Behind the Mouse, because it's a great book. Then go to One Man's Dream and look at just how much stuff was actually done by Ub. The multiplane camera, when he was still in art school, he invented, or not quite invented, but he made a self-cranking camera. Because at the time, animation required two people. One person to crank the camera and the other to feed the cells in. And so he made a device that would crank the camera itself. He made huge innovations on the matte process. Did special effects for the birds.
Oh, yeah.
Hitchcock's. He developed a machine based off of Xerox that got rid of in-betweeners. In-betweeners are animators who draw all the frames between the key animators drawing.
So basically, he put a lot of people out of work.
Yeah, but it was incredibly efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he put a lot of people out of work, but it's also 10 times more beautiful.
Absolutely.
Like, watch Sleeping Beauty. That's not a good movie, but it is a beautiful movie, and so I like it anyway.
And Ub also did a bunch of work on Disney parks attractions, too. That was later on in his career, mind you.
That must have been in the 60s?
Yep. In the 60s, he got involved with Disney theme park Imagineering and played a part in developing It's a Small World, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and the Hall of Presidents. And the first and last of those, It's a Small World and Hall of Presidents, they may be annoying and or boring attractions, but especially in Hall of Presidents, the animatronics involved were pretty impressive for the time, and they're still in use.
Mm-hmm. Small World, not so impressive animatronics.
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah, more or less just puppets on sticks.
Yeah.
But what I find most notable about Ub is his early animation. When he began his career fresh out of art school with Walt, they began the Laugh-O-Grams Company, which, this is fun. Theaters would commission them to make music videos for regional hits, which is interesting because that was something that was frequently done in like the 20s and to a lesser extent in the early 30s, but then music videos more or less disappeared until the 70s.
Yeah, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
With the exception of the Beatles. The Beatles actually were doing music videos at a time that nobody was doing music videos.
Well, they were making movies that let them make music videos.
True. Fair enough.
IRC, the Monkees were doing the same thing. So it's not like it was just the Beatles.
True, but I think the Monkees started doing it after the Beatles. But back to Ub.
But yeah, so he was making music videos and advertisements at Laugh-O-Grams, made the Alice comedies, which were a series about a little girl played by Virginia Davis being transported into this cartoon world, which had varying quality. First one was really good. Everything afterwards was kind of eh. But then they made Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, which was licensed and distributed by Mintz Industries or Corp or whatever, who would later be bought by Universal.
Mm-hmm.
And the Oswalds are really good. It's the first instance of conservation of mass. Felix the cat, his legs would extend so that he could get taller and look at something, but they wouldn't get thinner.
Right, exactly. His amount of mass would change.
It's also one of the earlier appearances of elasticity of all objects.
Mm-hmm.
Before, like in the Alice comedies, if something stretched, it would then just sort of go back like a telescope.
Right.
Whereas in Oswald, it snaps back. It like will snap and then go forward really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it also features a robot cow.
And what's not to like about a robot cow, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the best is Trolley Troubles, which is simply fantastic.
It is indeed.
It also has inexplicable telescope vision.
Oh, yeah.
This was sort of a trope of the time, both in animation and live action, and I don't know why, but frequently the frame will become circular with just like black around the edges. I don't know why it does this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know why either.
If someone who knows more about silent film could tell us.
Yeah, drop us a note. Podcast at thosedarncats.net.
But yeah, and it's at this point that Charles Mintz fires Walt and contracts out all the animators.
Mm-hmm.
Except for, of course, Ub, because Ub is awesome and knows that he can succeed without pretty much anyone, which was tested later.
Huh,
but
true.
We'll get to that in a minute. So, Ub in Kansas City knows that Mintz has done this and is working on a solution while Walt is still in California being caught up. And it's at this point, because remember, this is back when there weren't airplanes. I mean, technically there were, because Wright brothers were 1909, I'm going to say.
But they were not in common usage by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, so people were still taking trains. And trains take a long time. Walt was in California for just a few days, but it took him like a week and a half, 2 weeks, in order to do his business.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's in these 2 weeks that Ub designs Mickey Mouse and draws the first cartoon, Plain Crazy, which is about date rape in the air.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Which, now I feel kind of bad saying this, but it's also my favorite Mickey Mouse.
Well, it's back when, I say it's back when, as if like, at any rate, it's at a time when Mickey...
It was 1927. Or
28.
It was a different time.
It's at a time when Mickey was still the mischievous character, because that's how he started out. He started out very mischievous. And it was only when he became the corporate mascot that he had to get more wholesome and less troublemakery.
His wholesomeness begins as soon as Walt intervenes. Ub didn't really believe in likable protagonists.
Mm.
He believed in a protagonist that would keep the viewer's attention.
Mm.
He probably would have done very well on South Park.
Yes.
Whereas Walt wanted the viewer to like the character he was seeing. He wanted them to connect with Mickey Mouse, which is why as soon as he returned to Kansas City, he had Ub and 2 other animators make a cartoon where Mickey abuses animals for 7 minutes.
We are speaking, of course, of
Steamboat
the famous
Willie.
Steamboat Willie, yes.
Which was released before Plain Crazy because they wanted to have a gimmick to draw people's attention to their new character.
Which was a smart business move, quite frankly, because nobody had done synchronized sound for a cartoon before.
Yes, it's perhaps the smartest and certainly the most important decision that Walt made in his entire career.
Well, certainly in terms of animation stuff.
Yes. And so they released Steamboat Willie, which is about swinging cats around in the air. And
pulling on the teats of poor little piggies.
Yeah, and beating on the cow's teeth
Yes.
God, I forgot about this.
Yeah, it's a really, really sadistic little Mickey Mouse you
Yeah.
got there.
And then, like, Pete throws him the in the brig to peel potatoes, and we're supposed to dislike him for this.
Yeah, I still don't understand why.
Oh, and also that Crane is a total perv.
True. True, true. Yeah, everybody's just got to go watch Steamboat Willie so they have any clue what we're talking about.
Yeah, they also should watch Plain Crazy, which features the earliest I've seen example of uses of wiener dogs as technology.
I would like someone to write a book about the history of wiener dog technology in cartoons.
Yes. Oh my god. I would read that book like 3 times. And I don't read that fast. But, anyway, he made those, and he makes the Galloping Gaucho, or...
Gaucho.
Gaucho. The Galloping Groucho. That would have been good. Steamboat Willie and Galloping Gaucho actually are both parodies of contemporary movies. Steamboat Bill was a big hit of the time, and I don't remember what the Galloping Gaucho was a parody of, but I do remember it was a Douglas Fairbanks movie.
Okay.
Mickey was very heavily inspired by Douglas Fairbanks. That didn't stick around, but at the beginning, really heavily. And the Galloping Gaucho, I don't really have any good jokes about. I haven't seen it as many times. So, it's at this point that Walt launches the Silly Symphonies. I was going to say initiative.
But he begins that line of cartoons.
Yes. But he launches the Silly Symphonies series, which is where Ub makes my favorite cartoons from Disney, save for World War II. Because that's stuff like Nazi Donald and the Grain That Changed a Hemisphere.
Exactly, the Grain That Changed a Hemisphere. There's a packet, what's it called? On the Front Lines, I think it's called.
Yep, On the Front Lines. Also from the Disney Treasuries collection. The moral of the podcast is buy everything from the Disney Treasuries collection.
Yeah, it's really more interesting than one might imagine. There's a lot of interesting early Disney stuff.
Yeah, if it's from before 1950, just buy it. Don't even ask questions.
Or look on YouTube, because a lot of this stuff is on YouTube.
Yes, search YouTube for Der Fuhrer's face.
Donald in Naziland.
Yep. They didn't change the name because it was offensive. They changed the name because Der Fuhrer's face was a contemporary radio hit.
Yeah.
And so as a result, anyone who's anybody calls it Donald in Naziland. So Ub begins work on, probably the most famous is the Skeleton Dance. With music by Carl Stalling, who we have to give a lot of credit to.
Absolutely.
Who is the best composer to work in the field of cartoons. And sung by Thurl Ravenscroft.
An amazing voice actor.
Yes, amazing voice. Who I think our listeners will certainly recognize him as the guy who sung Grinch.
Absolutely.
And somehow, over the course of 40 years, his voice didn't change that much.
Yeah, amazingly consistent over the years.
Yeah, and so Ub writes that, and he also... Ub creates that, and he also drew a less well-remembered cartoon that I like more, but I'm not sure why, which is Hell's Bells.
Oh, yeah.
Which, the best way to describe it is Satan the Musical.
It's a pretty good way to describe it.
It's about demons and the Inferno and all this stuff, and they're all smiling.
And why shouldn't they be?
And they're all doing that thing that they did in the 30s in the cartoons in the 30s, where they're bouncing up and down.
I love that.
There's actually a reason for it. Because they used it as a metronome, basically. So the characters bounced to the beat so they could sync them up easily. But it's also really silly.
Exactly.
And so Hell's Bells is kind of silly, but I like it. I've worked on 2 more cartoons with Disney. The Spring and Summer Silly Symphonies, which were part of a series about seasons. But he was getting disgruntled with Walt, because Walt was very much streamlining the process of animation. He was trying to do to animation what Henry Ford did to the car. And Ub didn't like that. So he was given an offer by MGM to form his own studio, which he gladly accepted, and he brought with him a lot of the highest talent at Disney. Bob Clampett, Carl Stalling, and also people from other studios. Tex Avery was from, I don't remember if it was Van Buren or, God, I'm blanking on their name, the guys who did Betty Boop.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember what studio that was. I was never a Betty Boop fan.
Fleischer Brothers. But yeah, Tex Avery from Fleischer Brothers, all these amazing people came because they heard Ub Iwerks is starting his own studio. That's the biggest thing that can happen.
Yep.
They go to work for him, and he makes cartoons. They are interesting.
Balloon Land is my favorite.
You can watch them yourselves, actually. They are on Netflix streaming. Cartoons That Time Forgot, Ub Iwerks collection. They also have the Van Buren collection on there, which I have not watched yet, but I have seen the Ub ones. And they are interesting. The first one, or no, not the first one, but the first comic color was a little piece called Fiddlesticks, wherein a very early Flip the Frog, which would become the mascot for them, does dances with a Mickey Mouse ripoff, which I have mixed feelings about because he kind of made him.
Yeah, he's kind of ripping off himself, but at the same time, it's Walt's intellectual property. But actually, it's questionable. There are some intellectual property questions about some of the early Disney. It may have fallen into the public domain now, but no one really wants to be the test case. So you were saying about Flip.
Yeah, the Flip. He made series. Flip the Frog and Willy Whopper were the consistents. He also made a series of fairy tale adaptations, which were kind of the beta testing for Fractured Fairy Tales, the Rocky and Bullwinkle segment. But you got things like Humpty Dumpty, which is really silly, and I really love it. And it has this silly song at the end about spooning in a spoon.
Oh, I love the Humpty Dumpty, yes.
Yeah, and some of the characters get hard-boiled.
Yeah, one of the eggs basically turns into Mae West.
Oh, and the Don Quixote adaptation, I simply love. But anyway, these didn't really stick around because they didn't have... It was the Ub Iwerks philosophy of don't make a protagonist that people root for, make a protagonist that people like. Or, no, don't make a protagonist that people like. Make a protagonist that people pay attention to. And because the characters didn't stick with people the same way that Walt's Mickey did, it didn't grab people as well. On top of that, it was the Great Depression. The studio was founded in 1930 and was bought by Schlesinger Studios in 1936, which would then be bought by the Warner Brothers and be turned into Warner Brothers Animation. And on top of that, Ub's cartoons were very risque. It was not odd for a pair of breasts to be featured in one of his cartoons. They weren't designed for children. They were designed for a businessman who was traveling through town and had 5 minutes to spare and enjoy himself. And so when the Hays Code came into effect, the Hays Code banned disrespect of religion, races, all religions, authority, and, quote, anything else. So, Ub's very politically incorrect before politically incorrect was a thing studio ran into a lot of trouble, which is unfortunate because I really love Flip's design. And so they ended up running pretty much out of money, so Schlesinger was able to buy them cheap. After working for a few years at Schlesinger, you can find Ub's name on one or two Warner Brothers'. He returned to Disney, but not as an animator. He decided that he had beat animation. He instead returned as an engineer, which is where he developed the matte technology, the Xerox derivative. all that stuff. He was heavily involved in Mary Poppins.
Yes.
The special effects for that, which seemed kind of rudimentary to us, but there hadn't been live-action animation crossover in a long time.
Well, and that little audio animatronic bird in Mary Poppins was actually pretty good for its day.
Yeah.
So, since Greg, you're more the Ub Iwerks expert of the two of us, it seems to me that if they want to learn about Ub Iwerks, some of the best things they could do would be watch The Hand Behind the Mouse or read the book, The Hand Behind the Mouse.
The book was better.
If someone was going to just go look at one Ub Iwerks property, what would you tell them to go watch?
Do you mean anything he's worked on, or do you mean anything from his studio?
Anything he's worked on.
Oswald the Lucky Rabbit.
And some of those are available on YouTube, I do believe.
Yes. Oswald is finally back at the Disney company after doing nothing at Universal for a little bit under a century.
Yes, and some people may remember it wasn't too long ago that Disney traded Al Michaels, the sports reporter from ESPN, in order to get Oswald back into the fold. And the thing that they've done with Oswald subsequently that people might be familiar with is the Epic Mickey series of games.
Which are not good, but we like them anyway because they have Oswald.
Well, and I like the fact that they've actually done something to bring Oswald back into the corporate fold and to be actually...
Hey, they did two things. They made Epic Mickey, and they made a plushie.
That's true.
And I bought both these things.
And a few pins in the parks. They've got a few pins in the parks here and there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think my favorite Ub Iwerks property, because I'm assuming that people have seen at least some of the vintage Disney, which may or may not be correct.
Pretty much, I think everyone's seen either Plane Crazy or Steamboat Willie.
Yeah, and if you haven't, if you're a fan of animation at all, you owe it to yourself to go see that.
Also watch Gertie the Dinosaur.
But my personal favorite Ub Iwerks would have to be the Humpty Dumpty.
Oh.
Which I believe may well be on YouTube. And if not, it's certainly in the...
I think it's in the film archive thing.
The one that's on streaming Netflix?
Oh, I know it's on streaming Netflix.
Okay, so if you got Netflix, it's in the Cartoons That Time Forgot. And I think that's all...
Unfortunately, Netflix kind of screwed up. Cartoons That Time Forgot is treated as a movie.
Right.
So that's like 4 hours of cartoons and no scene select or anything. You can get the discs also from Netflix, but on streaming, there's no scene select.
Yeah, but it's worth it to deal with the fast forwarding if you want to.
Or you just don't fast forward and just watch Shotgun Them All in an afternoon.
Yeah, because...
That's what I do.
Because why not? Yeah, because I love the Humpty Dumpty and I love Balloon Land. Balloon Land is a very, very strange cartoon indeed.
Balloon Land is definitely at the end of something.
Yes. Not sure at the end of what, but it is certainly at the end of something.
And I guess I should mention that Ub won more Academy Awards than I can even mention.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, one of them being for The Birds, the Alfred Hitchcock property.
Yes, he won one for the Toy Soldier cartoon that he did at MGM, and $1.5 million for special effects.
Yeah.
And you could argue that he won one for the Lifetime Achievement given to Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, that really should have... his name should have been on that thing.
That's debatable. Because Ub never took credit for it.
True.
Ub very much believed that the reason that Mickey succeeded was because Walt took it away from him. And if he had continued working on it, it would not have been a success.
Well, and in all honesty, he could be right about that. Because, in my opinion, Ub was not quite as skilled as Walt at sort of long-term character development.
Yeah. Ub could not have made a movie.
Yes, I would have to agree.
Ub was great at comedy, but not character, nothing longer than like 12 minutes.
Yeah, he really was not into developing the characters at all. So, yeah, which is what made them such a good team.
Mind you, given how flat Snow White was, maybe he could have.
Maybe.
This This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music, Kat Lee for web design, and Brando K for the logos.
Be sure to visit our website at frontrowcrew.com for show notes, discussion, news, and more.
Remember, Geeknights is not one, but 4 different shows. Sci-Tech Mondays, Gaming Tuesdays, Anime Comic Wednesdays, and Indiscriminate Thursdays.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.